This is Jim Feig, your master photographer, back with you. I'm back with you on Wednesday now with my words of wisdom for the week. I'll bring you photos of the week on Monday and discuss the photography aspects. And then on Wednesday, I'm coming in with a little philosophy and a little thought on the picture itself. Today, I'm bringing in my favorite golden dog, Ben. This is a photograph of Ben. It was processed by Richard Korchinski at Korchinski Photos on Cozy Circle. They do a good job for me. They'll do a good job for you. Anyhow, I want to talk about what I learned from Ben today. What Ben taught me as he aged in life. Let me start out with a poem, a portion of a poem by Robert Frost. Robert Frost wrote these lines. He says, "I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a woods, and I took the road less traveled by, and that made all of the difference." What I want to talk about today is how events in your life can change your life. How things, small things or big things, come along and actually change how you think about things, how you do things. Let me give you some examples. Maybe a person comes into your life. Maybe you meet your future spouse. Certainly changes your life. Or maybe a decision that you make comes into your life. You have to decide, for example, whether to join the military or go to college. Definitely going to change your life. Or maybe even an event. You graduate from college and you get your first job offer. That's a big change in your life. Well, Ben and his brother Runt were a big change in my life. A drastic change. Let me tell you how it all started. My daughter Christy was living in Washington, D.C. She was a news correspondent for CNN at the time, and she lived in this little, I call it a shotgun apartment. It had one door in the front, one door in the back, one window on the side, and it just shot straight through it. It was a nice little place, but it's pretty expensive. Anyhow, you opened the front door and you looked right out on Capitol Hill. And you opened the back door, though, and you looked out on the slums of D.C., and she didn't use the back door much. Anyhow, one evening, I got a call from Christy, and she said, "Dad, I'll bet you'll never guess what I've got." And she was right. I would have never guessed what she got. It seems that a friend of hers was having to move from a house to an apartment, and it had these two great dogs that he couldn't take with him, so he gave them to Christy. Now, Christy's apartment was smaller than the one that this fellow was moving into, but she didn't care. She took the dogs. And then she said, "Dad, can you take care of these for me until I get a bigger place?" Now, I knew that wasn't a question. That was a statement. So, by the end of the week, Ben and Runt were on a plane flying from Washington, D.C. to Houston. Now, these were not ordinary dogs. These were pure blood Chinese Shar-Pei, the wrinkle-type dog. They were show-quality dogs, and they had the papers to prove it. And in addition, each of them were about 70 pounds of solid muscle. They changed our lives completely. I'll give you some examples. We went out one day to shop, and we left the dogs in the house because the weather was nasty and cold. Came back, and they were sleeping in the lazy boy chairs in the living room. Now, these lazy boy chairs sat one in each corner of the living room when they started out, but they had moved them both to the center where they're close together. And there they were, sound asleep. They couldn't tell us how those chairs got there. I remember another time. Weather was getting cold, getting toward winter, and I had wrapped the water lines outside the barn with some insulation and some tape to make sure they wouldn't freeze. Well, Ben and Runt decided that would make a nice game. So I think they called it Tug the Pipe or something like that. But anyway, when I looked out the window, I saw a water geyser about 8 feet in the air. The insulation was laying all over the ground. The plastic pipe was broken. And the two dogs were sitting there smiling, looking proud and saying, "Look what we did." Well, these are just a few examples of what we went through with Ben and Runt. I wrote a whole book about it and published it. It's around somewhere. You might find it in a garage sale. I gave away more than I sold, but it's out of print. But it's an interesting book if you can find it. What I really want to talk about today is not the antics of Ben and Runt, but the lessons I learned from Ben, especially as Ben grew older. Ben lived to be almost 18. In human years, that's about 100. And he lived his life to the fullest, and he left lessons for me on how I should live my life to the fullest as I grow older. Let me give you an example. As Ben started to age, cataracts clouded his vision. But he didn't let that stop him. He would still run and chase the rabbits and squirrels with the other dogs. He knew all of those paths in his backyard by heart. He knew every turn and bump and hill in it. He'd run down those paths just as fast as the other dogs would. If he saw something strange or weird, he'd stop and he'd cock his head up so he could look out of the corner of his eye where the cataracts hadn't given him too much problems yet. And he got along just as well with those cataracts as the other dogs were getting along with perfect vision. Now, the meds I'm taking are starting to make my distant vision a bit fuzzy. And I'm going to take Ben's advice. Stay on the paths that you know. Follow the paths that you know. I just had my driver's test, renewed my driver's license. I've got a driver's license now that'll take me until I'm 90 years old. And I'm going to follow the paths that I know and follow Ben's advice. I'm not going to slow down. Another example that Ben gave me, his hearing started to go. His hearing started to go and he developed what I called selective hearing. It worked for him well. Whenever I needed him, I'd call, and if he wanted to come, he'd come. If he didn't want to come, he'd turn his back on me and make off he didn't hear anything. I knew he heard me, but no, he said he didn't. Now I'm doing the same thing. I can take these things here, I can take these things here out, and I can do selective hearing too. It's very easy to do. You just take those out and you put them in your pocket, and if you want to hear, you can hear. If you don't want to hear, you don't have to hear. It makes life much more easy. You never get into arguments that way. Now another example I learned from Ben, he started getting some arthritis and his joints were creaky and it was harder to get up and down, and what he did is he found his own sunny spot. There were some windows in the back of the house that came all the way down to the floor almost, and even when it was on a rainy day it looked sunny there, so he just camped out there. He made his bed there. He says, I'm going to live on the sunny side of life, not on the rainy side of life. And he would just relax in his sunny side of life and take life easy. That was his philosophy. Live on the sunny side, not the rainy side, and you'll enjoy life more. And I'm going to make that my philosophy too. In fact, I have. Live on the sunny side of life, not the rainy side. You'll enjoy life much more. It's a good motto. Keep in mind. Well, the thing that finally did Ben in was his heart. That lively puppy inside Ben didn't, the heart didn't keep up with that lively puppy inside of Ben, so he started slowing down. when I'd take the dogs for a walk, he'd be right there with them. He'd be bouncing around just like the other dogs, waiting to get their chain on. But I didn't have to put a chain on Ben. I knew that he'd just come along. So I started out with the other dogs, and Ben would follow. He'd prance and run with them down to the end of the driveway. And that's about as far as he could go, a couple 100 feet. He'd sit down. He'd sit down and watch me go down the road with the other dogs, and he'd wait there. And when I came back, he'd still be sitting there, and as soon as the other dogs got there, he'd stand up. They'd run up to the house with the dogs and act like he was as happy as can be. And now if Ben could talk, and if you'd asked him why he was sitting at the end of the driveway, I'm sure what he would tell you is, well, I'm just sitting here waiting for the other dogs to catch up with me so we can finish our walk together. Now that's the philosophy I'm going to take. I'm sitting down more than usual. I'm resting more than usual. I'm getting slower, just like Ben did. So if you see me sitting down and resting, and you come up and ask me what I'm doing, I'll tell you I'm just sitting here waiting for the world to catch up with me so we can start a new project. Well, Ben's heart, it finally gave out. I was with him when it happened. He just sort of collapsed and lay there, and I helped him into the house, got some pillows, and I made him comfortable in my study. I sat with him, and I stroked his fur so that he would know I was there. He lay there probably an hour or a little more with heavy breathing, very slow, heavy breathing. Didn't do much else. Finally, he took one last big breath, and he just relaxed. He was gone. We buried him in a sunny part of the pasture, next to his brother Rod. My eyes were dry when he cried, but they were pretty wet by the time we got buried. And I left Ben, I left a good friend, and he left me with some advice. He said, live life to the fullest, enjoy life, don't let anything slow you down. So I said goodbye to my true and trusted friend Ben. And I took his advice. Jim Feig, coming from Southbridge Street Live. I'll see you again Monday. Thank you.